In our Data Masterclass podcast, data leaders share their unique stories. In this episode, we talked with Kinda El Maarry, the Director of Data Governance at Prima, a leading Italian insurance company, about her federated approach towards data governance and data quality. Let us welcome your host, Alex Borek.
Hello, my data friends. I have the huge pleasure to welcome Kinda El Maarry today, who is the Director of Data Governance at Prima. Welcome to the Data Masterclass podcast, Kinda.
Thank you, Alex. Hello also from my side. Thank you for inviting me.
It's great to have you. So you worked for a number of years at HelloFresh, also building up the data governance there. And then you joined Prima, was it last year? Is that correct?
No, actually just 2 months ago.
Oh, wow.
So pretty new.
So tell us a bit about your company. What is it about?
So like I said, I joined 2 months ago and I'm leading the governance function. Mm-hmm. And Prima is the largest motor insurance company in Italy. And probably there are two reasons why that led to their success and growth, because they actually achieved that within less than 5 years. And the two reasons behind that for me as a data person is very inspiring. So it's tech and data. So if you look back to the beginning of Prima, they started off at 2014. And what they did is they looked into the insurance sector and they looked at the big traditional players. And they saw a gap. And the gap was that when all the traditional players moved from an offline setup to an online setup, they chose to go always with buying third software parties. And what that led is they didn't really meet up their customers' expectations, because when you move this or when you do this transition, customers expect that, okay, we're online now, so we're going to be saving up on time and we're going to be saving up on money. And that didn't happen. And what Prima did was they said, you know what, we're not going to do that. We're going to actually invest in our tech. And they took it upon themselves to build the whole technological stack for the entire insurance value chain. And what that actually did was that it enabled, one, a more tailored customer experience, and two, they can actually produce their services at a much more competitive prices because they own this technology. So that's the tech side. On the data side, which was for me, like I said, very, very interesting, is if you think about it, an insurance company, unlike any other company, there is no physical product that is being sold, right? There is a policy, and the policy at the end falls down to the price. And to come up with the price, that's the whole game, so to say. How do you get the right price so that you are predicting the risk and doing this risk analysis correctly? And at the end of the day, everything that is happening behind with these risk models, it's based on the data. So you have to get your data right. And it is a first-class citizen, and it's not something as a data person that you come in and you have to say. They know it, right? It's their bread and butter, so to say. And so one of the reasons, obviously, they've seen, right, data and tech, they've been focusing on data, and they have been doubling down their efforts on the data. And since last year, they've made the transition, and I mean, obviously, it's still ongoing. We're in a very early stage in our journey, but we're moving away from a centralized data management approach and going towards a decentralized domain ownership approach, so a data mesh. And this is, for me, then an exciting time to join in, because probably you know better than anyone, governance is one of the 4 key principles of data mesh. And people have seen and learned the hard way why this 4th principle had to be added at a later stage, because obviously it was not there at the beginning. And you need that in place. Otherwise, it gets rather costly to come later on and try and patch things up.
And Prima is really now one of the largest insurance tech actually in Europe or worldwide even. Is that right? It's grown quite a lot.
It's the growth has been inspiring. So we had over 1 million customers in 2020.
Mhm.
And in 2022, this has grown to over 2.5 million customers.
Mhm.
And that gives you a bit of an idea on the growth level. Right now, they are expanding they've expanded already in the UK and Spain.
Mhm.
They're going to be expanding in other geographies and also expanding their portfolios. So
Right.
there's already household policies as well in Italy, and that portfolio is also going to be expanding in the other geographies.
Wonderful. And let's dive a bit into your background as well. So where are you actually from? Where did
That's
you grow up?
a complicated question. So I was born and raised in Doha, Qatar, and I was there for 10 years. Then I moved to Egypt for another 10 years.
Mhm.
And after that, I moved to Germany. So I did my master's and my PhD in a small city called Braunschweig. It's in the middle of Germany. And
I used to live there for at least partly for a
yeah,
while.
it's a very nice city.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed it.
I used to work as the global head of data at Volkswagen Financial Services, which is headquartered there.
Absolutely, yeah. In Wolfsburg. It's
It's Braunschweig. It's actually headquartered
it's
in
in Braunschweig.
Braunschweig.
All right,
Yes.
okay. Yeah, it is the employer in the region, right?
Yes. But then you moved to Berlin.
Yeah, exactly. So after I was done with my PhD, I wanted to go into the industry. Being in the academic world for over a decade, I wanted to see actual impact, right? I mean, when you write a paper and you send it out, you do get some feedback. Sometimes you do get implementation that people take your algorithm and they build up on it and you see some applications, but that's not, it's rather rare. And so what I had missed is actually getting my hands dirty and really seeing things happening based on the algorithms that you're developing or the frameworks that you're putting into place. And so that was kind of the time for me had come to say, okay, now let's get our shirts up and let's see what we can do. And it was an exciting time because I think I joined the industry 2016, and I was focusing on data quality. It's a topic that is very dear to me, and I was working extensively during my PhD on it. And so that's what I was focusing on at the time. And what was happening in parallel was that Jean-Marc's article came out. And obviously, I was in the company and seeing how the central data team was suffering for all the obvious reasons, right? Inherently being a bottleneck and frustrations from the business function teams not being able to get the data in the way that they wanted, having data quality problems, and having these requests delayed, right? Because obviously, as the company grows, its data grows exponentially. And so the number of requests coming in, it's just not scalable, right? Having this centralized team, and it's very expensive to scale it. And I don't think it's possible to scale it at the same rate in which your data would be scaling. And so what was happening concurrently was I was working on quality. And it's pretty clear that if you want to tackle quality, you cannot tackle it at the ends, right? And this is what a lot of initiatives around data quality fail, is that they don't go to the source, and the source is where the data is produced, right? You don't want it to propagate downstream with all the errors, because it doesn't work, right? It's kind of like the dragon that Hercules wants to kill, and it has 1,000 heads. I don't recall the name now, but if you chop a head, 2 heads pop up. And that's what happens with quality problems downstream. So you want to go to the source and just nip it in the bud, right? And this goes well with the idea of shifting the responsibility to the left, which is one of the core things in data mesh, right? You shift the responsibility to the left, and those who know the data best are in charge of it. They take ownership. And this is where data quality happens. And so while I was working on quality, the central data team was looking into taking data mesh and actually implementing it. And I do still recall that first session where they were talking about it. And back at that time, when I heard that, it was very, very interesting. And I saw the value in going in that direction, because I'd seen the pain points and the challenges and what was happening on the ground. On the other hand, there was this huge question mark, which is right. But as soon as you shift that responsibility to the left, how are you going to be ensuring that now that each domain is going to be autonomous, how are you going to be ensuring that whatever data product that they're built, that it's going to be interoperable, right? Because it's a decentralization at the end. And this is where I started calling for a data governance. At that time, that fourth principle was still not in place, so there was still no federated data governance. But it was a logical thing to think about. And I believe Jamak didn't put that principle in place because it was implicit. It was something that she took for granted. Of course, there should be some level of standardization that is placed so that this interoperability stays intact, because that's the whole goal. You want to build data products that can be reused. And if you allow the domains to just start creating their data products in their own way, and then you have completely foreign data products that do not, that looks completely different, and you cannot reuse it unless you do a lot of other things to start using it, doesn't work. And this is when I started then expanding my scope from quality, and I started looking into governance, and I started putting a lot of effort into getting buy-in for both topics, so to say, and for establishing a data strategy as well.
What was your experience working in data quality, before you expanded the role and also your personal mission, to a more decentralized data governance, data mesh-like approach?
So the previous role I was looking, actually, it was a niche, right? Which often happens when you're doing a PhD. So I was looking into crowdsourcing platforms, and crowdsourcing platforms are these online platforms where you utilize the power of the crowd. So if you have any task that cannot be done correctly through an AI model and you need a person to look at it, and it's usually tasks that are not very complicated, but they take a lot of time to do. So what you do is you send them to a crowdsourcing platform. A very good example that nearly everyone knows about and doesn't necessarily associate it with the crowdsourcing platform is these reCAPTCHAs that we get, where you have a picture of a postal office. At the beginning, I think they used real pictures where you have to say what the number was. And I think that project was from a postal office, so that they at some point can take that as a training data set and feed it into an AI or a machine learning algorithm. So it actually learns. So a lot of the tasks that are sent across crowdsourcing platforms are for training. So for training data sets, you tag and you create that metadata. And my focus was, how do we make sure that the data that is coming back is of high quality, that the people are actually answering correctly? Because what was happening a lot is that you're not seeing the crowd, right? You don't know who you're hiring. And so it could be just a person that is sitting in front of the computer and just tapping away while they're you're watching Netflix or so, right?
It could be a cat.
Could be a cat, right? So you never know who's behind the screen and what they are doing. And so people were investing even more money to ensure that the quality was good. So they would implement so-called gold questions, where you would sneak in a couple of questions that you know the right answer to. And if you get 80% of the time you get it incorrectly, okay, then this is fraud. But obviously this comes at a cost. And I was trying to look into, okay, how can we ensure data quality by using different mechanisms, but adding on top of that layer of a social layer with saying, you know what, most of the people who work on these platforms are probably people who did not have the chance to have access to proper education, or they're still actually upskilling. So instead of just using these strict and rigid mechanisms that are already there, like goal questions or having a majority vote, Let's try and look at these create profiles for them and understand, okay, that they're actually giving us wrong answers, but because this is where their skill level is, and then maybe target these people with easier tasks rather than kicking them off completely out of the crowd. So it was a data quality problem.
So you're adjusting to the cat.
So the cat would be kicked off, definitely.
Okay.
But anyone who is trying to earn a living and they're trying their best, that we would try and make sure, okay, yes, there's a quality problem there, but I took a step beyond to see, okay, right, that quality, but what is the reason? Is the reason legitimate? And if yes, let's do something there. So that was the main focus.
And when you apply data quality then in a corporate context, and you want to drive an enterprise data quality program, I guess, my experience is the main challenge is basically with scaling that. So, you can have a data quality team centrally in a data team, and they might be able to check a few of the data sets that are most crucial. But two problems here. They can only focus on a few data sets because they're only a small team. But also they don't know most of the data sets. Even if they would like to check them, they don't know maybe the context. They don't have the same knowledge as the people close to the source. So I guess that was those were probably the primary reasons for you. Is that right? To move towards a decentralized approach?
Mm-hmm. So that was, from my perspective, that was the beauty of this pitch to go to a data mesh. Coming at it from a quality perspective, I see that's the only scalable way to get at it. But from the centralized data team, obviously they had a couple of pain points, right? Obviously there was this inherent bottleneck that I spoke about. Right. And the bottleneck does not only lead to frustration from the business side, but it leads to other problems. And you see that in tech debt, because what happens is when the business teams start getting frustrated, they try to take things in their own hands and in their own control, and they start doing shortcuts, and they start introducing processes that are not compliant or inefficient, and you find duplicated efforts across the board, and you have all of these new layer after layer of tech debt, and the whole thing starts to become a jungle, right? And your data lake becomes a data swamp. So
and the complexity is growing without increasing the quality, and that's a problem, and absolutely. There's a lot of unnecessary complexity on top of a already very complex environment.
Exactly. And on top of that, you start getting also data silos, right? Because people are then copying the data and starting doing their own things on top of it, and then you're not aware where the data is, and a lot of the data are then on people's desktops and in Excel sheets and in Google Drives, and it just opens up a whole, it's like Pandora box, but not with the surprises that you want to see. Quite the opposite. And then obviously there are other challenges that comes with the centralized approach. If you think about, for instance, the quality, like I said, right? Obviously, if you have a centralized team, they, like you said, like you pointed out, they do not have the context. They do not have this domain knowledge. And so they can be top-notch engineers. They can be top-notch, depending on their expertise, but they will never have the context that the business have, that the people within the business have. And so they might end up putting stricter rules that is not needed, which makes data access more difficult, which doesn't necessarily fit to what the business use case is. So one of the pitfalls around data quality is people speak of having high data quality. And high data quality, there are a couple of challenges there, but maybe we can just focus on the one, regardless of us not necessarily mean the same thing when we talk about data quality. But when you want to say, let's say we all know what data quality is and we agree on the dimensions on all of that. So that's out of the picture. And when you say you want high quality across all dimensions, that is actually not necessarily the goal. What you need is a fit for purpose. And that is going to differ across the different use cases. And so you don't want to do it from a central point and put a lot of layers and put a lot of effort. Maybe you do not need that, right? And so that's obviously one of the challenges with the centralized approach. You can think about slow decision making. If all of this is happening in the background, all of these delays, that means we cannot access the data, we cannot find it because of the data silos, and that means at the end the business cannot operate. It cannot actually get their hands on actionable insights that that they can enact in a quick manner. And I think with a decentralized approach, what we actually open up is room for innovation within domains, because they start taking control of their own narrative and they can start operating and build these data products end to end with hopefully the right empowerment that we give them in terms of this is the tooling that you need, the capabilities. So if everything is correct, then they can actually build these data products in a seamless manner, in a very quick manner, and really focus on the business, and really focusing on building high business value data products that adds value. And this is where things start getting interesting, where they can really start innovating and coming up with things that is particular to their domain. So this is where the magic happens.
So how do we get to this magic? What are the first steps to get to that magic? We all agree that this is the magic, but getting there is quite tough, huh?
Yeah, that's the question of the generation, I guess. So there's obviously there's no recipe yet, right? It's an upward journey and it's not a well-trodden path. But there are some things that the community is agreeing on, right? So one of the first things that you need to do is to look at your data and understand, okay, what are my data domains? And start to reorganize your teams around that data and understand, okay, how do you do this data ownership mapping exercise? This is the first thing that you need to get right. The second thing is these domains has to become cross-functional. So you need to start to embed the right capabilities. And this differs from company to company. Some companies choose to have embedded data engineers. Others say, you know what, we're not going to embed data engineers. But you need data product owners. That's something I think that everyone in the data mesh community agrees on. Maybe you need data scientists and whatnot, right? So you need a cross-functional domain, because at the end, this is what you want to do. You want to have a team that can build end-to-end their data products, and you want this to be as autonomous as possible.
And I would also say, that you want to have, even if you don't have data engineers inside your domains, you want to have the most important domains covered almost in a dedicated way by central data engineers. Maybe not 100%, but to have somebody who feels very much attached to that domain and responsible for that domain for data mesh to work in such a scenario. But also in general, I would recommend that as a best practice.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, I agree. I think why some companies are trying to not have embedded engineers within the teams directly, but kind of go with the approach that you're saying, is that they've realized that isolating the engineers within the domains after they've been working in a team has its drawbacks and has its challenges. And I do know that some companies try to get around this by having a chapter where you still are connected to your data engineering tribe, let's say. For some companies it works. For some others it has been a more challenge. I think it's still an open question, and there's still many ways to get at it. And there's still no recipe there. And people are trying and seeing how it works best.
And I agree with you that there is a critical mass. So my experience is if the domain needs at least a few engineers, and there needs to be a team lead, and there needs to be, or at least maybe a generalist data leader that has enough understanding of data engineering, enough appreciation of data engineering for that to work, because otherwise, those data engineers will very quickly leave and find a place where they are more appreciated, and that's valued and understood. So I think it's a good strategy could be to have a central team that divides up into domains for those that don't have the critical mass or don't have the maturity, while the domains that already are, building up the capabilities and you can maybe support them, they might get to a tipping point where you can then hand over those engineers, or they build up their own data engineers and you use yours to cover the rest. I think that's quite a good strategy that I find working quite well.
Mm-hmm. And I think you're pointing here at a very, very important concept as well, which is that there's not going to be, even within one data strategy within a company, you're not going to always be following the same thing with the different domains, because every domain is going to have their own maturity level.
Yes.
And the level of federation, so the slider between centralizing and decentralizing, is going to be changing. And this is, I think, one of the trickiest things, is getting to that right balance for each domain, and how much support you give from a central function, whether that's a governance function or engineering in the example that you were giving, versus, okay, you're at a level where you can do that on your own, so we push back and we go shift the slider more in the decentralization direction, right? And this is where federation comes in and plays a huge role. And it's something I think that is still widely misunderstood and leads to, a lot of challenges.
And how do you specifically approach data quality in such a decentralized data management approach?
Mm-hmm. So it's similar in the strategy, in the sense that you're shifting the responsibility to the left, which means data quality, the accountability lies within the domains. And so the data quality checks has to be done at the source. You don't want to allow it to propagate downstream. And so on the one hand, so this is kind of a collaboration, right? So the governance function needs to define what this quality means, so we are sure that we're all speaking the same languages. Right. You can define them as data quality dimensions, parameters, whatever. There's a lot of literature outside as well that people can build upon and take the dimensions that you think works best for your company and define how these should be calculated. So you have a standard, right? And the implementation itself is then these data quality checks has to be done there at the beginning, at the source. Now, what we want to make sure is that these domains are empowered and they can do these data quality checks. So this is either by having that they have quality engineers, for instance, that can actually do this implementation, or alternatively, you have a very good self-serve service or platform that allows them to do these checks in a very easy manner, in a technology that they're comfortable with, SQL, for instance. Another thing that is very important and that has been gaining traction as well over the past 5 to 6 years is data contracts, right? And this is especially important within a data mission once you start decentralizing. And it's also one of the most powerful things that happens out of this decentralization, just that it forces people to start talking with others. And it forces data producers to start to understand, who's my data consumers? How are you using my data? How should I be producing that data, right? So this whole product thinking comes into place. Because one of the biggest challenges that we used to see in the past, sometimes data quality problems are they're not actually quality problems, but it comes from the fact that as a producer, I don't know who my consumer is. And as a data consumer, I never really said that I'm consuming this data. So I'm just putting my hands on it. And then it's not in the format that I want it to be, right? Mm-hmm. But that's not a quality problem per se. It's a quality problem once we've agreed that this is the format that I would like to have. And the data producer says, this is something that I can give you. And this is what I'm going to be, this is what you can hold me against, right? This format. And when the data producer cannot actually live up to the expectation that was set and agreed on from their side, that's when this is a data quality, right? So data contracts plays a huge, is very central here.
And I think one of the challenging things in data contracts is though to find that agreement, because you have so many consumers and so many producers, and and often these days when you see how companies implement data contracts, I think PayPal was right now made quite a buzz because they actually published, I think, even open source some framework for data contracts. It's sort of that the consumers say, hey, I rely now on your data and it has that impact on me, which is great because it gives you the transparency. And now I require you to do this kind of SLA, essentially. Mm. Now, this comes on top of the normal responsibilities of the teams, of the data producing teams. And what we shouldn't forget is that those teams have a business to run. Very often they're responsible for an operating system, for some operational processes, even maybe for the analytics for that operational part of your company, maybe for logistics or for customer service. And these requirements now come on top of the previous requirements that they had. If that comes from one team, okay. But if that comes from 10, 20 teams and they are different requirements, it can become quite tricky. And I think this is where it becomes really tougher. And this is where the true data product work starts. I think we need to, my experience here is that we need to identify the data products that are truly critical. And there we need to provide more, we need to create basically mechanisms to invest there in form of a steering committee or steering, some kind of place where there are people that can allocate budgets, to these teams. So it needs to be probably senior enough, or there need to be mechanisms in place to allocate that budget or those resources to those bottleneck teams, because there are a number of bottleneck teams. And if they are providing some of the most important data sets in the whole company, we need to support them. And that's, I think, a crucial point to make the whole concept work in practice. That's what I found in practice. You need to find ways to unblock these still bottlenecks, not central bottlenecks, but the decentral bottlenecks that serve the others, that now have to do 3 times the work, that they need to invest into data product management in the truest sense, where they need to understand their customers, they need to understand the trade-offs and find the right trade-offs. This takes time. And what's your experience in that?
Mm-hmm. It's a huge challenge, right? And I think there's other ways to get at it. So I admire that when people start thinking about it, they really look at the best case scenario, right? And the best case scenario is really a data producer saying, I have a data product, and reaching out to all the consumers and telling them, tell me your use case and I'll provide you with that, right? That's where we want to go. But that doesn't mean that this is where we should start. A better strategy is maybe to say, let's start small and take it from there, right? So I'm a data producer. I know how the data is produced. So I know what is possible and what is not possible. And so this is the data product that I'm going to be producing for now. And the consumer, it's like you're shopping, right? You're at a supermarket.
Yeah.
You look at it. Does it fit your needs? Fantastic. Ka-ching, you have it. It doesn't fit your need. Maybe try somewhere else, or maybe take that data product and do something with it, right?
Right.
This is a good starting place. The second stage, let's try and see, you have 10 different consumers. What are their use cases? How big of an impact that has for the company from a business perspective, and maybe start tackling or trying to reach an agreement with these top 3. And
right. That's very important. I agree.
And one of the things as well that worries me a lot is with data contracts, it is a living contract. It's a living agreement. And just because you've established an agreement with a consumer and one particular use case, that doesn't mean that that's not going to change. It will change because this is life, right? And so this adds even more layers of complexity to the challenge that you just set, right? Because this is not your business doing these data contracts. You have actually a whole other hustle on your side, right? That you have your business to focus on. And now imagine that's the scenario that you painted, but on top of that, things are changing. So I think,
and as you said, things are always changing.
Things are
That's
always
default.
changing, right? And we're all just starting on this journey. So I would say start, slow and easy, and see how things evolve, because you're starting as well on different dimensions, right? And maybe at some point, the technology that you have in place, if you have a self-serve data platform, maybe it's at a level where a data product has an API, and already in that API, there is already, it's easy and it's automated and you have the data contract. So maybe things will get easier in time, but at the beginning, they're definitely not. So it's fantastic that we all have this Northern Star, but this is not where we should start. Otherwise, it's going to be a huge overhead on the domains that needs to do that. And then things will not go our way, because people will start seeing that as an obstacle and as an overhead. And
right.
It is true, it's going to be an overhead. And we don't want them to reach that point where they say, you know what, we're not doing it anymore.
That's something we need to avoid at all costs. Mm-hmm. So we need to have some patience, I think, in such transformations, because that's the most important part, to take those people with you on that journey, and that they feel that it's the right journey, that they are, that their concerns are also considered along the way. Yeah,
absolutely.
Wow. So what advice would you give to other data leaders who have not, who are just starting off with decentralized data management and data quality? How should they get started? What should be the first steps, or what kind of thinking maybe helps? Whatever you can share.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I mean, we've been just touching upon people, so maybe we can start with that, because obviously there are many directions I can answer this question. But since we just finished with that, it's something that I've seen times and times again that is very underestimated. We focus on the building a data governance function, the standards, the policies. We focus on having the right controls in place. We focus on the technology. But what is usually underestimated is the people. And that is despite data mesh being a socio-technical approach, because people is really at the core there. And you really need them to be on your side.
Yeah.
And with when you do this transformation to a data mesh, it's a complete shift in paradigm. And you will face a resistance to change. And there's going to be a lack of awareness, and there's going to be challenges with adoption. And so you need to put in a lot of effort in your communication strategies, in trainings, and you almost need to drive a data culture. And that's a huge undertaking, right? Because we're talking about a culture. It's not something that's going to happen overnight. It's not something that you're going to achieve by going on a roadshow and talking about your data strategy and why this is the answer to all of our problems. But you have to put in a lot of different strategy and a lot of different techniques to put that into place. Whether if you're looking on the awareness and the training, a lot of people are thankfully, I'm very happy about this, are really looking into having data literacy or data fluency. I think there are many names nowadays: data education, fluency, literacy. So having a program in place where you make sure that before you roll out anything, that the people have the right maturity level, that any literacy gap is bridged, and they come from a place where they are empowered and they know exactly what's coming their way, and they actually have the capabilities to handle that. Other strategies to drive such a data culture can include building data communities, right? Whether it's around a particular topic or a particular tool. So having data community around machine learning, if this is something that is important within your company, discussing what ML models are working, what are not, what are the lessons learned. Having a Tableau community, for instance, to make sure that analytics and the way we are reporting and driving insights, that this is we're fostering collaboration and best practices there. You could also create or embed this data-drivenness and data-driven decisions in your company's DNA or principles or values. Every company has that. And try and look at the underlying structures that you have in the company and embed them there. So it's not only words, but it's actually deeply rooted. So for instance, if you have an onboarding process, make sure that you get data in. So when people come into the company from day one, they know this is our data strategy. It's a huge value. It's one of our key values. This is how we look at data. And they understand, okay, this is huge. This is huge. This is important, right? They understand that we're thinking about data. If you are doing a data mesh, you're thinking about data as a data product. And what does that actually mean? What else can you do? You can create, for instance, if you have such a value, what a lot of companies do is having some kind of award recognition program. And I think these are fabulous, right? Because they raise engagement. Yes. It's a way to embed this value because it's a regular thing that happens. And it fosters a very positive environment, right? Where people feel appreciated and they feel seen as well. And it's a very positive initiative that is good for any effort, whether it's data or not. Right? So there's a lot of strategies that can be done to kind of drive and promote a data culture, which is very important. So people is very important, and a strong focus and emphasis should be done there.
Wow, so many best practices or good lessons learned or things you simply, experienced and you want to share at the same time. Really cool.
You can also have a podcast, since I'm on a podcast now. I've seen that as well, right? It's
really cool.
Yeah.
And people can also hear you live actually next week at the Data Masterclass Europe 2023 in Berlin. You're part of our esteemed panel on data mesh actually. So yeah, what will you share there? Maybe a glimpse. What will you talk about?
Yeah, so I'm going to be talking about data governance and how we can tackle data governance under a data mesh management approach, because obviously that is rather different. We're looking at it from a federated approach. How do we balance between supporting and being a centralized function versus giving up some of this responsibility and empowering the domains to take that on? Obviously, data quality as well. It's a huge topic. I think we talked a little bit today about it and already shared a bit of my thoughts on it, but there's definitely more to uncover, and I'm really looking forward to the lively discussions. And I think we have Alex managed to get a fantastic round of people, and I myself am very much looking forward to hearing what the others have to say, and looking forward to discussions.
Me too, actually. I'm very, very excited to hear also what everyone has to say, because I think it's an incredible opportunity to learn. And I see that also as an incredible opportunity to learn for myself. Wonderful. Thank you so much, Kinda, for being with us on the Data Masterclass podcast. You shared so many interesting, exciting stories on your experiences firsthand on going into a decentralized model of data management, following some of the data mesh principles and thinking through what data quality in such an environment means. But also, you shared really, an abundance of of advice, actually, also on the topic of what you can do to manage and drive the culture change, actually. What you call the social part of the social technocratic change you want to drive.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Alex, for hosting me. It was a lovely chat. I'm very much looking forward to the Data Masterclass next week. So stay tuned, everyone. Hope to see you there.
Borek Data Masterclass, where great data journeys begin.